The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, the program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guest today is Marty Erickson, Director of the Consortium for Children, Youth, and Families at the University of Minnesota. The consortium was established in 1991 to bring together the competencies of faculty at the university with the many resources available in Minnesota's communities. It's a collaborative effort to discuss education, health, and social policy in an effort to improve the lives of Minnesota's children, youth, and families. Marty, it's a pleasure to have you here today, and we'll be talking about some of the initiatives of the Children, Youth, and Family Consortium at the University of Minnesota. And I don't know if a lot of us in the broader community really realize that the university is very committed to policy development that brings university staff and projects together with community individuals and organizations for the benefit of families. Discuss how this came about.
Well, it's been in the talking for many years, actually. There have been a number of people within the university who have identified the need for really doing more collaboration within the university, first of all, but then especially importantly, communicating with the communities, with the public more effectively. Of course, Minnesota Extension Service has done that for a long time, but there clearly was a need to really go further in pulling people together around children, youth, and family issues. So the talking went on for a few years, as these things often do, and a couple of years ago, the time just seemed right for action, and we did get a commitment of central funding. President Hasselmo has been very supportive of this initiative and opened our offices in November of 1991, pulling together people from all different departments and units at the university and building really strong links with people in human services, education, health, and just concerned citizens. Libraries, absolutely. I think I tend to lump libraries into education, but that might not be it.
Thank you, many people don't.
And really pulling people together, just concerned citizens, the general public, anyone who really has a vested interest in kids and families.
I think one of the exciting things that's happened is you bring the prestige of the university to children's services issues, and the very clout, if you will, of that name has been able to provide real leadership and sort of a thoughtful discussion of policy issues. And for many of us who are practitioners, the idea of research and evaluation is very removed from what we do on a daily basis, but yet it is tremendously important. I think at a time now, for instance now, when funding is somewhat conservative, we've got to be able to show that the programs for families and children that we're providing are truly effective in doing what they're set out to do, and that's where you can help us.
Exactly, and that those programs are grounded in basic research. I mean, it's both a matter of looking at ways to evaluate programs to document the effectiveness, and also just getting guidance for programs and policy from the basic research on what really matters for children and families. So that link, I think, is really critical, and the university does have a wealth of knowledge and has not always communicated that knowledge in a way that the general public and professionals out in the field can understand and use. So I think we're really making great strides in communicating that information more effectively.
Well, I would think it would relieve some frustration on the part of a researcher who's devoted a lot of time and effort to showing what happens or why things happen, and then to think that that knowledge is just totally gone, and that people who could really use it aren't, because they don't understand it.
It's much more satisfying to see that knowledge be put to work than to see it sit in a journal article on a shelf.
Well, some of the ways that you're communicating what the consortium is all about are through your newsletter, Consortium Connections,
That's right.
which again brings issues policy issues affecting children and families to the professionals in a very readable and understandable way. Spotlighting evaluation, for instance, or discussing some of the initiatives that are coming from the federal government and also from the state government.
That newsletter is available free of charge. We welcome anyone who would like to be on our mailing list. We currently have a mailing list of about 8,000 people around the state. It has a fairly wide readership outside of the metro area, and we're really trying to build those connections throughout Minnesota. So that's a good vehicle for passing on information from the university to the general public and the communities, but it's important to realize that this is a two-way communication, and we in the academic environment have a great deal to learn from people out in the community who are working with kids and families every day. And so this newsletter is a good vehicle for that as well. Many of the articles are written by community people who have wonderful ideas, wonderful programs to share. So we really use that as a two-way linkage between the community.
As your collaborations with communities become more rooted and more firm, do you think that the university would ever develop some research projects based on the information they get from communities? For instance, someone could say, we've got this situation here, we're trying to work through it, could you help us develop an evaluation tool?
Well, I think that already happens, and I think the role of the consortium will be to really enhance that. And there are a number of projects that I know of just off the top of my head that are already going on, and many of those are supported by the consortium. If they weren't initiated by the consortium, at least we're playing a part in facilitating that. For example, in Minneapolis, the university, particularly the Institute on Community Integration, is very active in evaluating programs in the Learning Readiness Initiative and Success by Six in the Minneapolis Area United Way. We, under the auspices of the consortium, are also working out in Goodhue County, communities in and around Red Wing, and doing a project that's aimed at raising public awareness about discipline of children, and particularly trying to promote alternatives to physical punishment. And that is tied into a very rigorous research project that we're working on in collaboration with Dr. Murray Strauss from the University of New Hampshire, who is a well-known national figure who does a lot of research in this area. So we're involved both in the programmatic aspect of that, really a broad community education and awareness campaign, and also in a controlled research study that is evaluating how effective that campaign is. A similar kind of effort has been going on up in Otter Tail County. So we've got our fingers in a lot of pies, and I think there are a number of places where that kind of collaboration around evaluating effectiveness of programs is happening, and that's going to be a major thrust for the coming year of the consortium, to really try to strengthen those efforts and promote more of them, because that's
You're
just
kicking
critical.
off this whole impetus with a symposium in the spring of 1994, which will
right.
bring many people from the community together to learn a little bit about evaluation and hopefully develop some networks where they can work on projects together.
Yes, we're having a conference on April 13th and 14th, 1994, and that is being co-sponsored by several organizations, actually, with the consortium as one of the initiating groups, and that will be a real important forum for really introducing people to some innovative approaches to program evaluation and an identification of some of the really tough issues that people encounter when they try to do evaluation research in these kind of mucky real-life situations in which we work. And we do see that just as a starting point in really having a concerted effort to do more of that. And we hope that there will be small study groups, working groups, series of ongoing forums around issues of evaluation. And the consortium is in a good position to just kind of do some brokering of services and really matching people up if there's an agency or a community that really needs some technical assistance, some consultation, a partner from within the university. We would really like to facilitate that. There are researchers out in the community too. We work a lot with Search Institute, for example, and they do really fine research and a lot of program evaluation. They're very actively involved in the planning of this conference as well, and working closely with us in trying to strengthen people's ability to do program evaluation.
We've worked with Search Institute on some library evaluations, and they have demystified it and made it accessible to us.
It's really important.
Without that
Really
kind of
important.
experience. Well, much of what you're doing now with the consortium is based on your career. You've done a lot of research on attachment issues with children and families, and you've done some research following families for almost 20 years. And this has recently received some very interesting national attention. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, first of all, just to identify for people what that work is, I have had the pleasure and good fortune to work with Drs. Byron Egeland and Alan Srofe in the Institute of Child Development for many years on a longitudinal study that they initiated back in 1975, following parents and their children and really looking closely at those factors that seem to allow kids and families to do well in spite of high-risk circumstances. And a big focus of that research has been on the importance of parent-infant attachment in laying the foundation for later development. And it's been just exciting research. It's been recognized and published all over the world. And I just feel really fortunate to have been a part of that. I have a particular interest in application of research and policy implications of research, and so my own work tends to be kind of outward focused, and I've been working in partnership with a woman by the name of Lynn Glenn, who is actually the daughter of Senator John Glenn, the former astronaut, and she has a personal passion for these issues and has been very effective in bringing some national attention to this work and really kind of initiating an exploration of what that means, what this work means for public policy around family issues. And most recently, we were invited by Vice President Al Gore to go to the White House for a private meeting with him and Mrs. Gore and two of their staff people. And it was just a thrill to see that someone in our national administration is so deeply interested in these issues, really wanting to know everything we could tell him about parent-child attachment and why that's important, and really wanting to grapple with how that should inform policy. So it was a very exciting meeting, and I think is just the beginning of an ongoing exploration of how we can really get that information out to the people who need it. And of course, that's what the consortium is all about.
Well,
so
and by the people who need it, we're talking about the need for consistency in child care arrangements, for instance, or for children
Absolutely.
having the opportunity to stay in a classroom for an entire year, or for foster care.
It touches on
all
so many
sorts of
issues,
things.
you know, flex time, family leave, any kind of policy that really supports parents in building those deep and important connections with their children. It's also about policies that that either support or hinder children's opportunities to form important relationships with other adults, particularly in cases where that home relationship might not be quite what it should be. So we just know from lots of different research studies all over the world about the importance of relationships in children's lives. Certainly that early attachment is critical, but other relationships as well. And so it's a matter of just looking at all the ways that we as a society can either support or hinder that opportunity for a child.
Did the Vice President give you any indication of how he was going to proceed in terms of legislation or more public discussion of this?
Well, we identified a number of areas of policy that this touches on, and also just some need for public awareness raising. So we did talk about ways that the Surgeon General or the Attorney General or the President and Vice President and their wives can use the bully pulpit to really affirm the importance of attachment and the importance of relationships in children's lives. And we were not at the point of being real specific in terms of legislation, but at this point the Vice President was very, very interested in just fully understanding how attachment influences long-term development. He's very knowledgeable about human development, is obviously well grounded in the study of that, and asked very good, very challenging questions, and was just wanting to really grapple with it. He's a very thoughtful, deep thinking person, so it was that kind of discussion, and I think we have a ways to go in really articulating what those specific policies will be.
But again, as you say, the thoughtful discussion at a national level and having that kind of leadership. Do you think this is going to transfer, or has it already transferred down to policymakers in the Minnesota legislature and our current administration?
Well, I certainly see some glimmers of hope, and right now there is a piece of legislation in the state legislature that has to do with tax credit for parents who choose to stay home with their young children, and that certainly relates directly to attachment issues. I think that in Minnesota we are more attuned to those issues than many states are. We've had early childhood family education programs for many years, ECFE programs through the schools. We're just way ahead of the rest of the country in those sorts of supports for parents. We have a number of legislative initiatives that really tie that kind of early family support to crime prevention. You know, that's a leap that a lot of people still haven't made, to really understand that early attachments are central to understanding violence, and the lack of a secure attachment can be a very major factor in leading to violence, or to being an easy victim of violence as well. So really understanding how that influences long-term development, I think, is something that Minnesota is quite ahead of the pack.
Well, and we've had some policy discussions before. Governor Perpeach instituted his Governor's Council on Children, Youth, and Families, which became the Minnesota Council. It's now an Action for Children Commission, and of course working very closely with the Legislative Commission on Children, Youth, and their Families. There are some exciting possibilities for people who work with children and families to actually impact legislation.
That's right.
Children's Services Librarian, it's exciting to me to see many of the issues that we have been concerned about for a long time finally receiving the kind of public attention that I think is necessary.
It is really gratifying, and I know a lot of us have been talking about these things for many years, and it really is very exciting to see them happening. And there are a number of wonderful advocacy groups here in Minnesota who have really done a lot of the groundwork for that. I think of Children's Defense Fund, Congregations Concerned for Children, the Coalition of Family Organizations, COFO. I know I'm leaving significant groups out, but I think that those groups have really done a lot, and the role of the Children, Youth, and Family Consortium at the University of Minnesota is to really make sure that those kinds of advocacy efforts are grounded in research. You know, what is the hard research that really should inform those kinds of advocacy efforts? And so it's been very exciting for us in the consortium to build strong relationships with those kinds of advocacy groups.
Well, it goes together, because without the strong research, we're reacting sort of instinctively or emotionally, and that doesn't cut as much weight, I don't think, with funding sources or policymakers who are saying, until you can prove.
There's a real need for that.
Balancing. Besides evaluation, what are some of the other things that the consortium is looking at for future projects?
Well, another major focus of our work right now, and I think for the coming years, is on cross-disciplinary education. You know, we have people in various disciplines who are all addressing the same issues with children, youth, and families. We have people in libraries, we have people in youth serving agencies, in human service, in education, in health, all sorts of people who are dealing with the same issues, but often not speaking the same language, perhaps duplicating each other's efforts, not coordinating those efforts. And I think that the fragmentation of services really is a reflection, to a large extent, of the way we train professionals who serve children, youth, and families. So at the university, we need to get our own house in order, for starters, and we're making a major effort to really try to do some innovative things in cross-disciplinary education, pre-service within the university, both in the undergraduate programs and in graduate programs.
So that elementary education or early childhood development students would perhaps be working with some social workers, people in public health, nursing. There are just all sorts of professions. We're developing a whole field of Renaissance people.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. We're really wanting to get those people together to identify what the core knowledge bases, what the core competencies are that anyone should have who's going to be working with children, youth, and families.
Certainly a knowledge of child development based on research is critical to a children's services librarian, a public health worker, a social service professional.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of work on that within the university, and really looking to partner with other colleges and universities as well. We don't want to just stay within our own little bailiwick, but we're very interested in looking on a more holistic level at what the training needs are and what the resources are for addressing those needs. So some of it may happen at the University of Minnesota, some of it may happen on other campuses that are a part of the University of Minnesota statewide network, some of it may happen at other colleges and universities around the state.
I think this change would be very, very difficult. It's hard when we've spent our lives working in a particular field to think that now we're going to have to broaden, or we're going to have to change the way we do things.
And I think, you know, we walk a fine line in terms of kind of preserving the integrity of the disciplines too. I'm not sure that we should all just be generic children, youth, and family workers. You know, there is a place for specialization and for specific disciplines. So I think we need to really look at where those lines are and where we can cut windows in the walls that separate the disciplines, not tearing the walls down, but really just cutting windows in them. We need to deal with
again, the expertise of each profession, as it collaborates with people from other professions, will avoid that fragmentation.
That's
or heal
right.
the fragmentation.
Yes.
And
yes.
people will be able to concentrate on what they do best with an awareness of what everyone else does best too.
Exactly. And we need to really look at the licensing bodies. You know, who are the people who are licensing different disciplines? That's where some of the criteria for training programs stem from. And so we need to make sure that we are in communication with those people who are making decisions about licensure of different professionals, and get them involved in this cross-disciplinary effort as well. It's a big challenge, but one that we're really willing to take on. And not only in the pre-service training, we have some very innovative things in the works in terms of ongoing training.
People who've been in the field for years.
Yes,
like
that's right. In fact, we're working closely with Marilyn Larson, who is originally from the Duluth area and was the first director of Action for Children. And we've been working closely with her in the development of a very innovative kind of training program that will be happening out in the community, will be really community driven, where communities are identifying what their needs for information and training are, and really coming together in some non-traditional ways to just to gain strength and new skills and new understanding in working with children, youth, and families. That's a project called the Community Connectors Institute, and it's just now in the stages of waiting to hear about funding for it. So the consortium has made a commitment to really supporting that, really being an initiator in that.
So if your funding comes through, then, for instance, the community like Minneapolis or one of the suburban Hennepin County communities could apply to have you come in and work with various individuals and organizations?
Well, for this particular project, at this point, Marilyn Larson, with funding from McKnight Foundation, did about a year and a half of planning and preliminary work with some target communities. And so there will be 9 communities that are a part of that project initially, with the idea that that could become a model for other communities. And the consortium's commitment is long-term to really working on a local community level to do that sort of thing, where we're bringing our resources into the community, but the community is really determining what it is that they need and want. And we just want to strengthen those connections on a very personal, very local kind of level. So that will be
this is an exciting type of systemic change that's taking place all over, that communities need to decide for themselves, and parents in a community, for instance, working with the schools. And this, you referred briefly to the School Human Services Redesign initiative that's taking place, for instance, in Minneapolis and suburban Hennepin County. And this is a very, very different way of looking at everything that we're doing.
It certainly is.
And again, it's scary in a way, because we're the professionals, we know what needs to be done, but yet unless we listen to the communities we're serving, we're going to be redundant, I would expect.
That's right. We really do need to learn to listen. And it's an exciting time, but it's also a time of disequilibrium in the whole system. You know, I think most of us are feeling kind of shaken and kind of confused. We don't have a clear sense of where we're going to go next, 1, 2, 3. there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that kind of disequilibrium has to occur before we can really find a new balance and move forward. That's a catalyst for growth, but it's not a comfortable place to be.
Well, no, it's not comfortable, but it's very encouraging to know that the consortium is there to help us all as we try to steer our way through this rather perilous time.
Well, we're committed to system change, and I don't know that we're leading the way. We're providing resources and really working with people and kind of sharing that journey, which is a real exciting one, I think.
Well, thank you for describing much of what you're doing now, and we'll look forward to working with you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marty Erickson. The Consortium on Children, Youth, and Their Families at the University of Minnesota is making issues affecting children and their families public policy issues for discussion all over the state of Minnesota. Thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.